The first time the rescue Pitbull growled at the new school counselor, everyone assumed she was being protective. The second time, teachers started exchanging uncomfortable looks. By the third week, even the sheriff began asking questions. Because every single time Rebecca Collins got within a few feet of 10-year-old Ethan Walker, Daisy reacted like she was staring at someone dangerous. Not nervous, not cautious, dangerous. And the strangest part was that Daisy never acted that way around anyone else. Not the teachers, not the principal, not the parents, not even strangers. Only Rebecca Collins. At first, nobody thought much of it. After all, Daisy was a rescue dog. Nobody knew exactly what she'd been through before arriving at a shelter outside Dallas 2 years earlier. The Pitbull had been found abandoned near an industrial property, malnourished, covered in scars, and terrified of almost everything. Then she met Ethan, and somehow everything changed. Ethan Walker lived with autism. The world often felt overwhelming to him. Unexpected noises could trigger panic. Crowded hallways exhausted him. Conversations that seemed simple to other children could feel impossible. But Daisy understood him in a way nobody else did. She could sense when a meltdown was building before anyone noticed. She knew when he needed space. She knew when he needed comfort. Within months of joining the Walker family, Daisy became Ethan's shadow, his protector, his best friend, and eventually his certified service dog. That was why Daisy accompanied Ethan almost everywhere, including school. The small elementary school outside Waco had welcomed the arrangement. Teachers quickly realized Ethan performed better when Daisy was nearby. His grades improved. His anxiety decreased. He smiled more. For the first time in years, Sarah and Daniel Walker felt hopeful about their son's future. Then Rebecca Collins arrived. The new counselor came highly recommended. She had impressive credentials, excellent references, experience working with children who had special needs. Everyone loved her immediately. She was warm, professional, patient. At least that's what everyone believed. Everyone except Daisy. The first incident happened during Rebecca's introduction meeting with Ethan. Sarah had accompanied her son after school. The meeting started normally. Rebecca spoke gently, asked Ethan about his interests, talked about creating a supportive environment. Then she reached toward a folder sitting beside him, and Daisy growled. A low, deep growl. The kind that seemed to come from somewhere ancient. Everyone froze. "Ethan, pull her back," Rebecca said with an awkward smile. But Daisy wasn't looking at Ethan. She was staring directly at Rebecca, her body stiff, her ears forward, every muscle tense. Sarah apologized immediately. Rebecca laughed it off. Nobody thought much about it until it happened again, and again, and again. Over the next several weeks, Daisy's behavior became impossible to ignore. Whenever Rebecca entered a room, Daisy became alert. Whenever Rebecca approached Ethan, Daisy positioned herself between them. If Rebecca got too close, the growling started. Not loud, not aggressive. Almost like a warning only Daisy understood. Teachers began whispering. Parents noticed. Students talked. Rebecca remained calm publicly, but privately she grew frustrated. "I've worked with therapy animals for years," she told Principal Morgan one afternoon. "I've never had one react this way." The principal agreed it was unusual. But Daisy's record was spotless. The dog had never shown aggression toward anyone else, which left an uncomfortable question hanging in the air. Why only Rebecca? Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior started changing too. At first, the changes were subtle. Small enough that nobody connected them. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He stopped talking about counseling sessions. When Sarah asked how things were going, he'd simply shrug. When Daniel asked if he liked Rebecca, Ethan never answered. Then one evening, Sarah found him sitting on his bedroom floor with Daisy curled beside him. "Ethan!" The boy stared at the carpet. "Daisy doesn't like her." Sarah smiled softly. "We know." "No." Ethan's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Daisy says she's bad." Sarah felt a chill. Not because she believed dogs communicated with children, but because Ethan rarely expressed opinions about people. He struggled reading social cues, struggled understanding motives. For him to say someone was bad was unusual. Very unusual. "Why do you think that?" she asked gently. Ethan looked toward Daisy, then back at the floor. "I don't know." That answer bothered Sarah far more than she admitted. The weeks passed. The mystery deepened. Then a teacher reported something strange. During recess, Rebecca had been sitting with Ethan near the playground. Nothing unusual there, except several students later mentioned seeing Ethan become visibly upset. Rebecca quickly ended the conversation and escorted him inside. When the teacher asked what happened, Rebecca said Ethan had become overstimulated. Case closed, or so it seemed. But later that day, Ethan told his mother something different. Miss Collins asked about my old address. Sarah frowned. What old address? The house before this one. The comment seemed harmless, except Rebecca had no reason to ask. The family had moved only once, and it wasn't information relevant to counseling. Sarah mentioned it to Daniel. Daniel wasn't concerned, at least not yet. But a seed had been planted. A question. One that refused to disappear. Then came the parking lot incident. A rainy Thursday afternoon. Parents lined up outside school. Sarah waited beside her SUV. Ethan emerged with Daisy. Rebecca followed a few steps behind. Everything appeared normal until Rebecca reached toward Ethan's shoulder. Daisy exploded. The bark echoed across the entire parking lot. Parents turned. Children jumped. Rebecca stumbled backward. Daisy planted herself directly in front of Ethan. Hackles raised. Eyes locked, protective, terrifying. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah rushed forward. Rebecca looked pale, humiliated, shaken. I'm sorry, Sarah said, but Rebecca wasn't listening. She stared at Daisy, and for a split second, Sarah noticed something unexpected. Fear. Not annoyance. Not embarrassment. Fear. Real fear. Then it vanished, just as quickly as it appeared. That night, Rebecca filed a formal complaint. She argued Daisy's behavior was disruptive, potentially dangerous. The school board scheduled a review. If things continued, Daisy could lose permission to remain on campus. The decision devastated Ethan. For the first time, he openly cried. He locked himself in his room, refused dinner, refused conversation. Only Daisy remained beside him, watching. Waiting, protecting. Sarah knew something wasn't right. The dog didn't behave like this for no reason, and Ethan's growing discomfort around Rebecca only added to her concern. Daniel finally agreed. Maybe they should look deeper. Not because they suspected a crime, not because they believed wild theories, simply because too many things felt wrong. Their first step seemed harmless enough. They searched Rebecca Collins online. Nothing alarming appeared. Professional profiles, previous schools, counseling certifications, volunteer work. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. Daniel couldn't explain why that bothered him, but it did. A few days later, he called one of Rebecca's former employers. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. When Daniel hung up, his expression had changed. What? Sarah asked. The principal said Rebecca worked there, and he sounded confused. Confused how? Daniel hesitated. He said she only stayed 6 months. Sarah frowned. Rebecca's resume claimed nearly 3 years. Silence filled the room. For the first time, the possibility of something bigger entered their minds. Still, a discrepancy on a resume wasn't evidence of wrongdoing. It could be a mistake, a misunderstanding, nothing more. But when Daniel contacted another listed reference, the mystery deepened. The person had never heard of Rebecca Collins. Now they had questions, real questions, and they weren't the only ones. Sheriff Luke Harper entered the story almost by accident. Luke had known the Walker family for years. He attended church with Daniel, coached Little League, the kind of sheriff everyone trusted. One evening, Sarah mentioned Daisy's behavior during a community fundraiser. Luke listened politely, then laughed. Maybe the dog just doesn't like counselors. But Sarah explained the resume inconsistencies, the strange questions, Ethan's growing anxiety. Luke stopped smiling. Have you reported any of this? Reported what? Daniel asked. We don't even know if anything's wrong, Luke agreed. Still, he promised to make a few calls. Nothing official, just curiosity. At least that's what he said. 3 days later, Luke called. His voice sounded different, serious, concerned. I need you both to come by the station. Sarah's stomach dropped. Inside Luke's office, a folder sat on the desk. Thin, ordinary. yet somehow intimidating. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Luke leaned back. "I ran Rebecca Collins through several databases." Neither parent spoke. "There were no criminal records," Sarah exhaled. But Luke wasn't finished. "There was something else." He opened the folder. A photograph slid across the desk. A younger woman stared back. Different hair, different glasses, same face. Sarah felt cold. "Who is that?" Luke answered quietly. "Her name isn't Rebecca Collins." The room fell silent. The woman in the photograph had another identity, another name, another history. And according to Luke's findings, she had disappeared nearly 8 years earlier. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew where she'd gone, until she suddenly resurfaced in Texas under a new identity. The revelation raised far more questions than answers. Changing your name wasn't necessarily a crime. People did it for many reasons: abuse, privacy, protection. Yet something felt deeply wrong, especially because several pieces of her past seemed intentionally erased. Luke began digging harder. The deeper he dug, the stranger things became. Former addresses vanished, employment records conflicted, references couldn't be verified, entire years appeared missing. And then he found something that changed everything. A cold case, 3 states away. A missing child investigation. The case had never been solved, never proven, never closed. But the woman formerly known by another name had been questioned during the original investigation. Not charged, not arrested, just questioned. Yet her connection remained buried in police records. Luke couldn't ignore it. Neither could the Walkers. Meanwhile, Ethan's anxiety worsened. He started having nightmares, refused counseling sessions, refused entering Rebecca's office. When asked why, he repeated the same phrase every time. "She wants something." Nobody knew what that meant. Even Ethan couldn't explain. But Daisy seemed to understand. The dog never relaxed around Rebecca. Not once. Then came the breakthrough nobody expected. A substitute teacher approached Sarah after school. Nervous, uncertain, she explained she'd witnessed a conversation between Rebecca and Ethan weeks earlier. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Now she wasn't sure. "What conversation?" Sarah asked. The teacher swallowed. "Rebecca kept asking Ethan about photographs." "Photographs?" The teacher nodded. "Old family photographs." Sarah's heart skipped. The Walker family kept dozens of photographs online. Nothing unusual, nothing secret. Yet why would a counselor repeatedly ask a child about them? The teacher continued. She seemed very interested in where certain pictures were taken. The pieces still didn't fit, but the puzzle was growing, and every new detail pointed towards something hidden, something Rebecca desperately didn't want discovered. Luke obtained a warrant for deeper background records. What he found shocked even him. The missing child case wasn't random. Years earlier, a 12-year-old boy had vanished from a community center in Oklahoma. Witnesses reported seeing him leave with a woman matching Rebecca's former identity, but evidence was insufficient. The trail went cold. The child was never found. The woman disappeared soon afterward. The case remained unresolved for nearly a decade. Now she was working directly with children again. Luke needed proof. Real proof. Not suspicions. Not coincidences. Proof. Unfortunately, Rebecca seemed to sense pressure building around her. Her behavior changed. She became guarded, careful, and then she made a mistake. A big one. One afternoon, security cameras captured Rebecca entering a restricted records room at school. She had no authorization, no reason to be there. When administrators reviewed footage, they discovered several student files had been accessed, including Ethan's, especially Ethan's. That revelation stunned everyone. Why Ethan? Why focus so heavily on one child? Luke obtained permission to examine Rebecca's office. Most of it appeared normal. Then investigators found a hidden flash drive. Inside were hundreds of files, photographs, personal information notes, data collected on children from multiple schools over several years. The discovery transformed the investigation overnight. Rebecca wasn't simply hiding her identity. She had been systematically gathering information on vulnerable children. Still, investigators needed to understand why. And then the horrifying truth emerged. Rebecca had connections to an illegal network that targeted children with developmental disabilities and social vulnerabilities. Not trafficking in the sensational movie sense, something more insidious. She identified children who struggled communicating, children less likely to be believed, children easier to manipulate. Then she provided information to others. The operation stretched across multiple states. Suddenly everything made sense. The hidden identity, the fake references, the missing years, the obsession with Ethan. And Daisy, especially Daisy, because Daisy had recognized something long before any human did. Years earlier, before being rescued, Daisy had been found near one of the abandoned properties linked to the same investigation. Investigators eventually discovered Rebecca had visited that property multiple times under her former identity. The dog wasn't remembering a face. Dogs don't work that way, but scent, that was different. Daisy had encountered that scent before, somewhere buried deep in instinct and memory. A scent associated with fear, danger, trauma. The moment Rebecca approached Ethan, Daisy recognized it and never forgot. The investigation moved quickly, but Rebecca realized the walls were closing in. She tried resigning, tried leaving town. Luke obtained a warrant before she could disappear. Yet the most dangerous moment came before deputies reached her. School had just ended. A thunderstorm rolled across central Texas. Most students had already left. Ethan remained inside, waiting for Sarah. Daisy rested beside him. Teachers hurried through dismissal procedures. And somehow, during the confusion, Rebecca reached Ethan first. Nobody knows exactly what she intended. Investigators later debated that for months. What matters is what happened next. Rebecca approached calmly, smiling, speaking softly. She encouraged Ethan to follow her to another office, a quieter office, away from the storm, away from the crowd, away from everyone. Ethan stood uncertainly. Children often trusted adults, especially authority figures. Maybe he would have followed, maybe he wouldn't. Nobody knows. Because Daisy intervened, the dog stepped directly between them. Rebecca froze. "Ethan," she said gently, but Daisy didn't move. "Come on, sweetheart." Another step forward. Another growl. Low. Deep. Final. Then Rebecca did something witnesses never forgot. Her smile vanished. Instantly. Like a mask falling away. For the first time, people saw something beneath the friendly counselor persona. Something cold, something angry, something frightening. She grabbed Ethan's wrist just once. Just long enough. Daisy launched forward, not attacking, not biting, blocking, driving herself between Ethan and Rebecca with enough force to break the contact. Teachers rushed toward the scene. Rebecca turned and ran. Outside, rain hammered the parking lot. Sheriff's deputies arrived less than 4 minutes later. The pursuit lasted nearly an hour. Several arrests followed across different states. Families finally received answers they had sought for years. The cold case involving the missing Oklahoma boy was reopened. New evidence emerged. Though some questions remained unanswered, investigators made significant progress for the first time in nearly a decade. For the Walker family, the emotional aftermath took longer. Ethan struggled understanding everything that happened. He only knew one thing with certainty. Daisy had protected him again and again and again. The town felt the impact too. People wrestled with guilt. Many had trusted Rebecca completely. Some had dismissed Daisy as an aggressive dog. Others had criticized the Walkers. Now they understood. The dog hadn't been causing problems. She had been sounding an alarm nobody wanted to hear. Months later, the school organized a community gathering. Families filled the gymnasium. Teachers, students, deputies, neighbors. Nearly everyone from town attended. Principal Morgan stepped onto the stage. He spoke about courage, trust, paying attention when something feels wrong. Then he invited Ethan and Daisy forward. The applause started slowly, then grew louder and louder, until the entire gym stood. Ethan looked overwhelmed. Daisy simply sat beside him, tail wagging, completely unaware of the attention. A plaque was presented recognizing Daisy's extraordinary role in protecting a student and assisting in investigation. The crowd cheered. Some people cried. Sarah definitely did. Daniel wasn't far behind. Sheriff Harper later admitted something during his speech. "If I'd listened to that dog sooner," he said, smiling sadly, "we might have solved this even faster." The audience laughed softly, but everyone knew he meant it. Because sometimes warnings don't arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes they arrive on 4 paws. Years passed. The story spread far beyond their small Texas town. News outlets covered it. Animal organizations recognized Daisy. Service dog groups shared her story nationwide. But fame never mattered to the walkers. What mattered was Ethan, and Ethan was thriving. He grew more confident, more independent, more comfortable navigating the world. Not because his challenges disappeared. They didn't, but because he knew he wasn't facing them alone. Every morning, Daisy still walked beside him. Every afternoon, she waited for him. Every evening, she rested near his bedroom door, just as she always had. One spring evening, long after the headlines faded, Sarah found Ethan sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. Daisy lay beside him, older now, a little gray around the muzzle. Sarah sat down quietly. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then Ethan asked a question.
Mom?
Yeah? Why did Daisy know? Sarah looked toward the dog. The faithful rescue Pitbull lifted her head briefly before settling back down. I don't know, Sarah answered honestly. Ethan thought about that, then smiled. I think she loves me. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. I think you're right, because maybe that was the simplest explanation. Not magic, not mystery, not some supernatural gift. Love. Pure, stubborn, protective love. The kind that notices danger. The kind that refuses to stay silent. The kind that stands between fear and the people who matter most. Long before investigators uncovered fake identities. Long before warrants. Long before arrests. One rescue dog had already reached her conclusion. Something wasn't right, and no matter how many adults ignored her, doubted her, or tried to explain her behavior away, Daisy never changed her mind. She kept watching, kept warning, kept protecting, until the truth finally caught up. And in the end, that truth changed everything. A vulnerable little boy remained safe. A dangerous secret was exposed. A community learned an unforgettable lesson. And a rescue pit bull that nobody wanted became the hero nobody expected. Even now, people in that small town near Waco still tell the story. Not because of the criminal investigation, not because of the headlines, but because it reminds them of something important. Sometimes loyalty sees what logic misses. Sometimes instincts notice what credentials hide. And sometimes the bravest voice in the room isn't a voice at all. It's the low growl of a dog refusing to let danger get any closer to the child she loves.